So last video we started things off with this controversial topic, and today we're going to be finishing it. The idea of being overrated definitely does carry a negative connotation to it, but I feel like everyone needs to realize that a player can still be considered overrated while also being really damn good. The concept of overrated stems from a player being viewed as better than they actually are by the general public, and when this is the case, players are usually really good objectively still. Last video we got things started where I went through every team in the Eastern Conference to identify their most overrated player, so today we'll be going through the same thing with the teams in the Western Conference. Before we start though, I want to thank PrizePicks for sponsoring this video. PrizePicks is the perfect service for all of us basketball fans here because when you're involved, it makes watching games every night so much more fun and engaging. Basically, it's an application that provides you with lines on all kinds of individual player props, such as points, rebounds, assists, three-pointers made, amongst others, and you simply have to choose whether you believe they will record over the set amount in the line or under the set amount in the line. Make your selections, wager however much you want to, and if your picks hit, you can win some big money. For some picks that I'm looking at making for today's slate of games, I'm thinking of going with Donovan Mitchell to score over 26.5 points, LaMelo Ball to dish out over 6.5 assists, and Luka Doncic to grab over 8.5 rebounds. If this sounds at all intriguing to you, then go use the link down in the description of the video to sign up today and use promo code REFERENCE to receive a 100% deposit match bonus up to $100. Once again, thank you to PrizePicks for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to the topic at hand. Going in alphabetical order by team, we'll be starting with the Dallas Mavericks, and their most overrated player right now is Tim Hardaway Jr. Honestly, this was a tough team to pick a selection for, but after Hardaway's impressive showing in the playoffs last year, I definitely feel as though the perception of him is greater than what he is in reality, as this season, he's been a pretty inefficient scorer, and statistically, the Mavericks have performed better with him on the bench. Next up is the Denver Nuggets, and their most overrated player is Michael Porter Jr. MPJ got a lot of hype last season when he showed that he could knock down tough shots from the perimeter consistently, but he then got rewarded with a big max contract, and I just don't think he'll ever play up to the money that he got paid. He is a liability on defense. When his shot isn't falling, he struggles to impact the game in other areas, and on top of that, the injury concern is very real with him, where there's no way to know for sure if he'll recover fully from what he's rehabbing from at the moment. Up next is the Golden State Warriors, and their most overrated player is Andrew Wiggins. I said this at the time of the All-Star voting, and I'll repeat it now. There is no way that Wiggins should have been an All-Star this year, and the fact that he got nominated to start the game is one of the biggest mistakes we've seen in recent All-Star game history. It basically felt like a pity nomination after all the years that Wiggins was slandered, because it certainly wasn't based on his production on the court. Next up is the Houston Rockets, and their most overrated player is Kevin Porter Jr. KPJ scored 50 points in a game last season, and since then he's compared to some of the best young players on the rise today, but this is now his third year in the league, and he's still an inconsistent shot creator who should be more in a secondary playmaking role instead of being used as a primary ball handler. Up next is the Los Angeles Clippers, and their most overrated player is Robert Covington. Covington is a former member of the All-Defense team and has been pegged as one of the best 3-and-D players in the league for years now, but I think at this point in his career it's safe to say that he's coasting off of his reputation rather than what he's actually producing on the court in the year 2022, as his defensive impact is nowhere near what it once was, and he's still just a league average shooter. Next up is the Los Angeles Lakers, and their most overrated player is Anthony Davis. Davis has, at least in my opinion, been one of the most overrated players in the league for years now. He just got named to the NBA's top 75 all-time players list, which was an incredibly debatable selection, especially based on who was left off of the list. He has avoided playing the center position for years because of how much he hates the physicality that comes with it, and even this year, Lakers fans continue to use the excuse that they will improve when he returns from his injury, but the Lakers still have a losing record in games that Davis has played in this year. Up next is the Memphis Grizzlies, and their most overrated player is unfortunately Ja Morant. I want to say first and foremost that I love Morant and what he's doing this season and his ascension over the last few years, but quite a few people with significant platforms tend to take things way too far with him, including this morning where analysts were saying that he's better than Allen Iverson ever was and that he deserves to be an MVP candidate in the top 3. This year, the Grizzlies have won 15 of the 17 games that they've played without Ja Morant, which I'm not using as a way to slight him, but it's more so to show that the Grizzlies are a really talented deep team, and they deserve more credit even though Morant seems to get all of the credit for their success. Next up is the Minnesota Timberwolves, and their most overrated player right now is Anthony Edwards. Again, Edwards is another selection that I hate having to make because he's a fun young player on the rise with plenty of reasons to like him and his game, but because of his likability, most people overlook his weaknesses, such as the fact that he ranks below average in terms of isolation points created and overall scoring efficiency. Next up is the New Orleans Pelicans, and their most overrated player right now is Zion Williamson. I can admit I've contributed to the overrating of him in the past because while Zion's production on the court has been awfully impressive, he hasn't been able to stay on the court long enough to justify crowning him as anything yet. It's now official that he's going to miss the rest of the season, which is unfortunate, and who knows how he's going to play next season after an entire year missed. Next up is the Oklahoma City Thunder, and their most overrated player is Aleksej Pokusevski. Everybody likes Poku because of his combination of height, length, and intriguing creation off the dribble, but the fact of the matter is that he hasn't been a very good player at all on either end of the floor, being taken advantage of on defense because of his lack of strength, and struggling with consistency on offense. Up next, we have the Phoenix Suns, and their most overrated player right now is Chris Paul. Ever since his arrival in Phoenix, Paul has been credited with so much of the Suns' emergence, and it has resulted in most people overlooking the development of everyone else on that roster. Paul has now missed the last 16 games before returning last night, and they won 12 of those games without him, proving that they're a really damn good team top to bottom, so hopefully the media begins to take some notice. Next up is the Portland Trail Blazers, and their most overrated player is Damian Lillard, but basically by default. The Blazers' season at this point is focused solely on developing their young guys now that Lillard is out. They've traded away most of their legitimate contributors otherwise, so because Lillard was having a down year before he got injured, he pretty much had to be the choice here because there really wasn't anyone else for me to choose from that made sense based on who's playing for them right now. Up next, we have the Sacramento Kings, and their most overrated player is De'Aaron Fox. For a long time, the average viewer would insist that Fox was a much better player than Ja Morant, and not only is that so far from the truth, but it's also just something that I never agreed with in the first place. Fox is now in his 5th season, and has never come close to leading his team to a playoff appearance, and after a while, it starts to feel like his production is becoming a bit hollow. Next up is the San Antonio Spurs, and their most overrated player is Lonnie Walker. Walker is viewed as a nice young player with high upside because every time most people see a highlight from him, it's him throwing down a vicious post or dunk. But he's in his 4th season now, and he's still shooting below league average from both the field and from 3, and there isn't an area outside of scoring in his game that really sticks out as impressive either. And finally, the last team in the Western Conference is the Utah Jazz, and their most overrated player is Rudy Gobert. The story with Gobert seems to be the same thing every year, where the advanced analytics love him, he wins the Defensive Player of the Year award, then in the postseason teams find a way to neutralize him, and he becomes a liability. Eventually, we have to learn from the past and stop making the same mistake over and over again. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below who you think are some of the most overrated players in the Western Conference. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.